We'll start on the bottom of Dalit Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. So the previous discussions the Gemara had regarding BEITZA Shenolda were, first of all, the case of what happens if a Shabbos and Yontif fall one after the other. Do we say BEITZA Shenolda b'zeh muteres b'zeh? And we wanted to assume that was based again on discussion of Kedusha Achas or Shtei Kedushas. When you're are the 2 days really the same level, or are they the same? Like, do we treat it almost as one long day, or do we treat it as 2 separate days? Then we got from there to the discussion of Shnei Yamim Tovim Shel Galios, when we keep 2 days of Yontiv. And Chutz La'aretz again, is that Kedusha Achas or Shtei Kedushos? Are you keeping one? Or when you keep the 2 days, do you assume it's all like one long day because when the Rabbana made the takana, they made a takana really to keep 2 days? Or do we assume no, that you're only keeping 2 days because of Safek, and therefore at the end of 2 days, you knew that one of the days you kept was for sure Kodesh, one day was for sure Chol, and therefore if you'd say that BEITZA Shenolda Bazeh, Muteres Bazeh. Now we're going to discuss the third case. The third case is Rosh Hashanah. Why Rosh Hashanah is unique is because Rosh Hashanah falls out on the first day of the month. So as soon as the Eidim come to Beis Din and they declare a new month, that day automatically becomes Rosh Hashanah. So it's harder to spread the news. So we'll see how that plays out with here. So Itmar Shnei Yamim Tovim Shel Rosh Hashanah. So Rav Shmuel Damri Tarvayu Nolda Bazeh Asur Bazeh. So Rav and Shmuel both agree that an egg that's born on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, on the first day, is asur to eat on the second day. Rashi explains Asur Bazeh Shehem Vadei Chok Kavua Lios Kiyam Aruch, because it is certainly when the Rabbanan made the decree to have 2 days, to keep 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, they treat it as if it's one long day. Because when they initially instituted to keep 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, they didn't only tell you to keep it in Safek, they didn't know which day it would be Rosh Hashanah. There were situations where even when they knew, and we're going to see what the case is, but even when they knew that what day would be considered the first day of Tishrei, they would still keep 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, and therefore we see it's not because of Safek, it's because of Vadai, and Kedusha, it would be Kedusha Achas. So what's the situation? Titznan. So initially, when the Eidim used to come and testify about the new month, they were allowed to come all day. So Rashi explains Kol Hayom. So what happened? Yom Shloshim Shal Elul. So they would be allowed to come the whole 30th day of Elul. Umi Ba'erev Hayu Asurim Bimlacha. Shema Yiskadesh HaKodesh Lamachar. So what happens? Already in the beginning of the 30th day of Elul, they already stopped doing malacha. Because if at any point during that day the Eidim come, so the 30th of Elul then becomes the first of Tishrei, which is Rosh Hashanah, it's Asur B'mlacha. So already starting the beginning of the 30th of Tishrei, 30th of Elul, they started keeping Yontiv. V'nim says Shalayla has a Yontiv, because maybe the Eidim would come and it would retroactively mean that the beginning of that day was already Yontiv. Shekain Kol Hayom Mitzapin La'edus Roe Alavana, because all day they were waiting for witnesses to come to testify about the new moon.
They're just not doing malacha.
They're not doing malacha, correct.
But they're not observing Rosh Hashanah.
Well, that's what we'll see was part of the issue in terms of, observing Rosh Hashanah, I guess we're thinking in terms of the modern day, in terms of davening in shul. For them, it relates to korbanos, which we'll see in a second. Okay, so ulayavo v'chol sha'asha ba'inach techshach, and as long as they would come before the nightfall, hayu mekablin edusa and mekachin achodesh bo bayom, and they would declare that day the new month, which is Rosh Hashanah and Yom Tiv. So what happened? Bottom of Dalim Beis. Pam achas nishtahu ha'idim lavo. The witnesses, they came late during the day. Finis kalkalu halavim bashir. So what happened? Whenever the korban tamid shel ben harbaim was given, they would sing. The Levim would sing the shir shel yom along with the korban. So the Eidim hadn't come yet, so they sang the shir shel yom of let's say it was a Wednesday of that Wednesday, and it was good. But then the Eidim came. So once the Eidim came, that means it was Rosh Hashanah. Which means they should have sang. They should have, right? That whole day was Rosh Hashanah, which means they should have had a different shir. So, and therefore they sang the wrong one. So what they do? They weren't happy about that. So hiskinu shelo yehu mikablin esa edim elad mincha. So they instituted they would only accept the witnesses until mincha, as in until really the korban shel ben harbaim was given. Okay.
What would be wrong with them singing on tonight?
What do you mean? But what would be to sing 2 songs?
Yeah, what's be wrong? On tonight, if it turns out Freya that it's Rosh Hashanah, okay, to say it, or if not. I guess maybe it's hard to say that you can do that all tonight. Like, what does that mean? I mean, just sing 2 songs and I mean, you're not being makriv.
Yeah, I don't know exactly why the shear it makes it so important. Meaning, I'm assuming I can't tell you for sure, but even if you're singing the wrong shear, the korban is still good. I don't know if singing the wrong shear is maybe it is. If it is, then I don't think it is.
That's why it's tonight. If you do tonight, even if it's the wrong shear, right? It's gonna.
But if they're doing the shear for Wednesday, it is Wednesday. There's nothing wrong.
That's true.
Right.
Look, but I'm saying, but we do, on Yontif, we have. Oh, okay, I'll tell you what the truth is. Our minhag on Yontif, for example, we only do the days of the week. If you go to minhag agra, if you go to Eretz Yisrael, for Yontif, there's different shir shal yom. Meaning, you don't say on the first day of Pesach, you don't say. Yeah, whatever it is, you don't say the shir shal yom for the weekday. That's. I mean, chutz la'aretz, I don't exactly know where that comes from, but that was the issue. So then what happened? V'im ba'u edim in mincha lamala. So let's say edim did come in a mincha lamala. So now they came towards the end of the day. They already gave the korban. So what would happen? Noagin oso hayom kodesh, ulamachar kodesh. So they still instituted that both days would be yontiv. The edim came after mincha. So really that day should have been the first day of Tishrei. But they didn't want to have these issues with the shear of the korban tamid. So they instituted that 30th day of Elul to be almost a yontiv. But then the next day, the first day of Tishrei, they'd also keep yontiv. So we see in that situation, when the edim come towards the end of the day, we know very well when the first day of Rosh Hashanah is. We know it's the next day. And nevertheless, we're telling you to keep the 30th day as yontiv as well. Which means that the whole institution of the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah in this situation was not because of Safek. We knew which day was Rosh Hashanah, and we still required them to keep 2 days. So therefore we treat it as Kedusha Achas, and therefore BEITZA Shenolda Bazeh, Asura Bazeh. So let's read Rashi. B'niskalkul avim bashir. So Tamid shel bein ha'arbaim, she'amru bo shira shel chol, right? Shayu sivurim shelo yavo od. They didn't think the witnesses were going to come that day. V'hayom chol, they thought today was really a weekday. Uchsheba'u nimtza shu kodesh. And when they came, turned out it was kodesh. Okay, now Rashi is going to ask the question. Okay, that's great for the Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim. How about the morning one? You also sing the Shira for the morning one, and that was also Rosh Hashanah. We don't have a problem with that. So Rashi explains, V'shel Shachar ein taus. So we're not concerned, that's not considered a mistake. So even if the new moon was instituted before they gave the morning korban, shir shel chol hayu omrim. They always said shir shel chol. Because in a general year, the witnesses didn't come so quickly. I guess they didn't want to start doing different practices, different years. So they instituted that for shachar. For shachar, you always, excuse me, they always said the weekday, you always said the weekday shir shayom. Okay, next Rashi, ad ha-mincha. So ad ha-kravas tamid shel ben harbaim. Aval la'achar mikan, if the witnesses came after that the time they offered the korban shel ben harbaim, oso hayom harehu ma'ubar. So it becomes a leap month. So the month becomes 30 days. Umoni miyom machras yom kippurim v'sukkos, and only the next day is going to be the first day of Tishrei. And if witnesses came after this time, so even though we can't start, that's not the first day of Tishrei, we don't want people to start doing melacha. So the same way we started the whole day with Isser Malacha, we're going to complete the day, even though we know that really the next day is Rosh Hashanah. Alma, what do we see? Tchilas Asiyah Shnei Yamim LeRosh Hashanah Afilu BeBeis Din Hava. We see that it wasn't only a Safek, meaning it was almost a, Beis Din instituted this. Below mi Safek. Shari Vadai Shiyom Tov Lamachar. They knew that the next day was the first of Tishrei. The Afal Pichein Tiknei La'asoso. And nevertheless, they instituted that the 30th of Elul, you should keep Yontiv. Shmamina Chok Chachamim Mitzvasan Haya La'asosan. Okay. So that all works for the place where there is Beis Din, because then you know when it's Yontif. But how about the people far away who you have no idea what's going on in Beis Din? You have no idea if the witnesses are coming 10 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the evening after, in that in-between period. So the Rechokim always had to keep 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Shema Yavo Edim Achar Mincha, because maybe witnesses would have come after Mincha. So in situation, I think La Sosan here, I think they always had to keep 2 days because of Safek. But I think here we're saying that they always had to assume, not only did they have to keep 2 days, Misafek, they had to assume that maybe the witnesses came at the end of 1 day, and therefore it was Kedusha Achas. We can't say that one of the days for sure Chol, Neshama ein kan Chol, el shnehem Kodesh.
We don't celebrate Rosh Hashanah.
Okay, excellent. The end of Hey Amud Beis, we'll see how we move to 1 and 2, the first, second of Tishrei, as opposed to the 30th of Elul and the first of Tishrei. Great, right. That's a good point. So we'll see at the end of the DAF how that happened. Tosfos asks another question: why are we so concerned about the song that we sing with Tamid Shal Ben Harbayin? How about the Korban Musaf? Because we have a principle they're not supposed to give any korbanos after the Tamid Shal Ben Arbaim. So if you haven't given the Korban Musaf yet, so why are we concerned about not giving any of the korbanos for Rosh Hashanah? He offers 2 answers. I'm just trying to remind myself. I think one answer is just even though we have a principle you're not supposed to give anything after the Tamid Shal Ben Arbaim, that's only when you can. And this is obviously a situation where you can't do anything else. And he brings another case where we'll make an exception to the rule. So we see there are exceptions to the rule, and this will just be one of the exceptions. Or else possibly he says that maybe it's an asay de rabim. You have a conflict and it's doche the asay de hashlama. So whatever it is, Tosfos deals with the issue of it seems like they would have been able to give the korban musaf, and the only issue would have been the shira they sang with the Tamid Shal Ben Harbaim. Okay, back to the Gemara. So Amar on the 4th line. Amar Rabba mitakanas Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai veilach. From the time of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, BEITZA muteres. So then, BEITZA shenolda bazeh muteres bazeh even Rosh Hashanah. Why is that so? Ditzanan, the Mishnah teaches, Mishachara Beis HaMikdash, once the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai shemekablim edus hachodesh kol hayom. He said, well, we're not concerned with this anymore. Once the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, we don't have korbanos. We don't have to worry about singing the wrong shira with the Tamid. And therefore, he said, we can now accept edus all day. Okay. So Amar le Abaye. So Abaye says, what do you mean? Rav and Shmuel BEITZA asura. Rav and Shmuel taught us BEITZA asura. So how can So how does that work with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai saying it's mutter? So they respond to him. Amar le Amina lecha ana Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai va'at Amar le Rav Shmuel. I don't understand your question. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is a Tana. Rav and Shmuel are Moraim, and Moraim are not allowed to argue on Tanaim. So the question's almost flipped. You can't start telling me, well, Rav and Shmuel say it's Aser. How can Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai say what he wanted to? He was the Tana. They can't argue on him. He already said it was mutter. And then the Gemara continues, Rav and Shmuel kasher mas nisin. Right? It's really flipped. How can Rav and Shmuel argue on the Tana? How can Rav and Shmuel say it is Aser if Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai already said it was mutter? So the Gemara concludes, Lo Kashya, Halan, Halahu. They're talking about 2 different people. Let's just see Rashi, Halan, Halahu. This is the first wide line of Rashi. So the Bnei Eretz Yisrael she'osin yom echad muteres. So according to the Bnei Eretz Yisrael who only keep 1 day, so then it's muter. And therefore, BEITZA shenolda bazeh muteres bazeh. Abal l'didan b'nei gola, but for the us living in Bavel, asura. So why is it Aser? Shere adayin anu osin shnei yamim. Because we are still keeping 2 days of Yontiv. Ve'odenu kivatchila mipnei osa takana rishona. And why are we keeping 2 days of Yontiv? Because of the initial takana that, maybe the 8th came in a mincha lamala. Lo mipnei safek. And we didn't keep these 2 days because of safek. We didn't know which day would be Rosh Hashanah. Hilchach. Since we never stopped keeping 2 days, we can't say, well, now we're only keeping 2 days because of the safek. Since we never stopped keeping 2 days, we have to assume that we're saying keep 2 days. Bnei Gola were always keeping 2 days. They didn't know what Rosh Hashanah was. The question is, are they keeping 2 days Kedusha Achas or Shtei Kedushos? So we're saying, once they started keeping it because of Kedusha Achas, they have to continue keeping it because of Kedusha Achas. BEITZA muteres. And we're not going to allow you to say, oh, they're only keeping 2 days because of Safek, and the BEITZA would be muter. Sorry. I apologize. BEITZA muteres halo amrinan. It doesn't say BEITZA muteres. Techeven lo paska osa takana me'atzleinu. Since we never stopped keeping this minhag, takana, Shana achas lasos yom echad adayin b'yisureinu rishona amadnu liosam kiyom aruch. Since we've always been keeping 2 days, we have to do it for the reason we did initially, which keep 2 days because of kedusha achas, because maybe the edim would come min mincha lamala. So even though there's no longer BEITZA mikdash, we're going to keep that practice, and therefore what comes out is that in Eretz Yisrael, after the time Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, BEITZA shenolda bazeh muteres bazeh, but in Bavel, BEITZA shenolda bazeh asura bazeh. Okay. Now we're going to have a whole slew of Amoraim saying that even after the Takana of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, we still are going to say, meaning that the Eidim can come all day, and whenever they would come, we would declare that to be the first day of Tishrei. We'd still say BEITZA shenolda bazeh asura bazeh. So Rabbi Yosef Amar af mitakana Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ve'elach BEITZA asura. Why? My taima. So have a davar shebeminyan. Bechol davar shebeminyan tzarech minyan acher la'atira. What's the reason for this? We have a principle that if you have a gzeira takana, some enactment made by the Beis Din, by a group of rabbis, so even if the reason no longer applies, we can't really repeal that takana, that enactment, until another Beis Din comes along and says that whatever they said before was aser is now going to be mutter. So now we're going to go on a bit of a tangent how we learn this halacha, and then we'll come back to our case. So Amar Rabbi Yosef, mina aminallah. How do I know that davar shebeminyan tzarech minyan acher latiro? That how do we know that if we, based on again enacted some made some enactment with a reason, the reason clearly no longer applies, that it's still not mutter until another basin comes along and says it's mutter. So we're going to bring up several proofs. We're going to bring a few examples, and we're going to explain them on the next Amud. So he brings, first of all, Dichsiv leich emor lahem shuvu lachem lo lechem. The situation, the case we're talking about here, is 3 days before Matan Torah, the Bnei Israel are given the command they should not be intimate with their wives. So it seems like it said for 3 days. So you'd assume after 3 days it would be mutter. Nevertheless, after 3 days, HaKadosh Baruch Hu still tells Moshe, tell the Jewish people, Shuvu lachem lo lechem, that they could be intimate. So that's one. Ve'omer, and another proof. Bimsho chayovel hema ya'alu bahar. So another idea is that, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe that Bnei Israel, the animals, they can't go close to Har Sinai when the Shechina is there, which would assume, almost when it's no longer there, they could go. And nevertheless, the pasuk says, "Bimsho chayovel," when the shofar blasts, when that, almost the process is over, "Hema yalu bahar," they can go ahead up to the mountain. And now a third proof, Fitnan, Kerem Rivai Haya Ola Yerushalayim Mahalach Yom Echad L'chol Tzad. So Kerem Rivai, what is Kerem Rivai? Let's just look in Rashi. Kerem Rivai Sha'amra Torah Kodesh Hilulim. So the Kerem Rivai is the fruit that you have from the 4th year. The fruit they have from the 4th year you have to bring up to Yerushalayim to eat. How do we know that? Ve'gamrin and Kodesh Kodesh mi Meiser Sheni. We learned this from Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni as well. You have to take your fruits of Meiser Sheni and bring it and eat it in Yerushalayim. Tichsiv Bei Kodesh v'chol Masar Aretz Mizeretz Mipriya 8, because it says the word Kodesh regarding Kerem Rivai and regarding Meiser Sheni. So what do we know? Shetzarech lahalos appears to Yerushalayim. So either have to bring up the fruits to Yerushalayim, or liftosan ulahalosan hadam in Yerushalayim. Or if it's too much for you to bring, so then redeem the value almost of your fruit to money. You'll take that money and you'll spend that money up in Yerushalayim. B'tziknu chachamim, but the chachamim came along b'mahalach yom echad l'chol tzad shelo yiftuhu. So the chachamim said, you know what? If you live a 1 day's distance away from Yerushalayim, you're not allowed to redeem your fruit onto money and take the money and spend Yerushalayim. Ela peros atzman yalim. You have to take the actual fruit and bring it to Yerushalayim. V'yochlim sham knefarish lekaman. We're going to see it right now. Kedei la'ater shuke Yerushalayim peros. They want to make Yerushalayim beautiful. So if everyone's just bringing their money, it's not so nice. If everyone bringing their new, their fruit and everything up to Yerushalayim, it looks very nice. So again, let's go back to the third almost proof we have for davar sheminyan tzarech minyan acher latiro. So kerem revai haya oleh Yerushalayim malach yom echad lechol tzad v'zohi tchuma. What were the boundaries? So Eilat min ha-darom, Eilat from the south, Akravat min ha-tzafon from the north, Lod min ha-ma'arav from the west, and Yardi min ha-mizrach. They're just giving the boundaries of the one-day journey. V'amar ula v'iteima Rabbi Bar Bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan. Matam, again, what was the reason for this? Kedei la'ater shuki Yerushalayim peros. Want Yerushalayim to be beautiful, with all the fruit brought up. Vitanya, but we also have another brisa. Well, we have a brisa which says, Kerem Revai Hayalo Rabbi Eliezer b'mizrach Lod. So Rabbi Eliezer had a vineyard, had these fruit on east of Lod. So he said Lod was the western boundary. So if it was east of it, he was required to bring it up to Yerushalayim. Bitzad Kfar Tebi. So ubikesh lahavkiru la'anim. But he wanted to deem his field, his fruit, ownerless, and the anim could come take it. Why did he want to do that? Rashi says, "Lafkiru la'anim sheyilketu heim." He wanted the anim to come collect the fruits, v'ya'alu liYerushalayim, and they'll bring it up to Yerushalayim, v'yochlu sham. Why? Sheya'alav torach la'alo sham aperos. It was too much for him. He couldn't bring them all up, so and again, he wasn't allowed to redeem it to money, or he thought he wasn't allowed to. So better he be mafkir it, have the anim come collect it, and they'll bring it up. So Amr lo Talmida, back to the Gemara, students told him, Rebbe, Kvar nimnu alecha chaverecha v'hitiru. You already had friends. There were already Rabbanim who came along and said that no longer applies. And since the base of Mikdash is destroyed, I guess we don't have to be choshesh. Look at Rashi. Kvar nimnu alecha chaverecha v'hitiru lifdoso lahalos damab. They allowed you to redeem the money and redeem the fruit and bring up the money. V'apal gav. Okay, so you're just saying that even though it's after the Churban, that even though the base of Mikdash was destroyed, it still maintains its Kedusha, therefore you still have to keep the mitzvah of this. Okay, so Man chaverecha. So who is this person? Who are this group of people? So Rabbi Menachem and Zechus. He was the one who said this gezerah no longer applies, and even if you're a one-day journey of Yerushalayim, you would still have to bring. You would be allowed to redeem the Meister Sheni to money and bring up the money. So what do we see? Time ad dinimnu. It seems like it only would have been permitted to do that because Rabbi Menachem and Zechus said it was mutter. But how lo nimnu? If another group of rabbis didn't come along and say it was mutter, lo, it seemed like it would have been aser. So even though the reason you would think doesn't really apply anymore, Yerushalayim was destroyed, nevertheless, it wouldn't have been mutter until somebody explicitly came and said it was mutter. So Rashi just explains time at the nimnu halonim nulo v'afagav demimela leisel takanta kamaisa. It seems like once the Mikdash is destroyed, the whole takana falls away. Dehakadei la'ater shuki Yerushalayim havu dehava, because the reason was to make it beautiful. V'chevan decharba malanu la'atara. Why should we make Yerushalayim beautiful? L'torach hanochrim. Right? It seems like Rashi almost saying not only does the reason not apply, it almost seems like we shouldn't do it because then we're making Yerushalayim nice for the Nochrim, and nevertheless the apilu hachi, nevertheless tzarich minyan. We still need another group to come along and say it's mutter. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and explain. So why do we need 3 proofs to prove davar shebeminyan tzarich acher la'atiro? So ma'ay ve'omer. So the question means why do we need the second proof? But we're going to explain the first one as well. Hachi kamar. So once the pasuk says, for 3 days you should prepare for Matan Torah and you shouldn't be intimate with your wives, so it seems like 3 days. Lech and more lahem, shuvu lachem lo lechem. Lamali, why do I need to tell them after 3 days, now you can return to your tent? After 3 days it falls, the gzera almost falls apart by itself. Shma mina, kol davar shebeminyan tzarich minyan acher latiro. So it teaches this principle. So now we're going to say v'chitema limitzvas onahu da'asa. Maybe you'll tell me that no. Why does Hashem have to say lechem or shuva lechem lo lechem? He's not telling them. The gzeira obviously that no longer applies. And if you want to tell me, he's only telling them that they have to go fulfill the mitzvah of ona. Ona is the obligation a man has to have relations with his wife. So maybe that's what it's teaching us, that Hashem's telling him to go perform that and nothing to do with davar shebeminyan. So v'chitem mitzvahs onahu da'asa. Maybe that's why it's coming. Tashma. So therefore we have the second proof. Bimsho chayovel hema ya'alu bahar. So at the sound of the shofar blast, so then you can go up to the mountain. So michtik siv gam habakar gam atzon rabakar al yiru el mul hahar hahu. So once we say that the sheep and the oxen can't go graze on the grass, and that only is really when you're up on the mountain. So why do we need to know, like, when the shofar blasts and Hashem's Shekhinah may no longer be there? Why do we need to tell us that? Meaning, it's obvious. Once the process is over, maybe the Shekhinah is no longer there, the animals can go graze. Shma mina davar shebeminyan tzarich minyan acher lahatiro. I'm not going to give the particulars, but Rashi and Tosos both explain. If you look at the psukim of these two, psukim, you see that one of them is actually talking about the first time, the Kabbalah Torah, in Matan Torah, in Yisro, and the second time is actually talking about when Moshe goes up the second time to get the Luchos. So how does that work, bringing these two proofs together to explain what's going on? That's a question that they try to deal with. Okay, so therefore, again, if the first one isn't good, then we have the second one. And now, and maybe you want to tell me, fine, maybe this only applies to statements of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. If Hashem says something, he has to almost rebuild it. Right? Rashi says, this is towards the bottom of the Amud, but 6 lines down from the wider lines of Rashi. Maybe this only applies when Hashem tells us something. Therefore, if Hashem says something's aser, we need to make sure to hear something from Hashem to say it's mutter. Maybe when the rabbis come along, maybe we don't need an explicit statement of the Rabbanan to say it's mutter. Maybe we can infer that the reason no longer applies, it should be mutter. So back to the Gemara. So we bring the third proof. Tashma kerem revai. Kerem revai derabanan, and the kerem revai was a din derabanan, and nevertheless, rilay kvar nimnu alecha chavirecha vihiti ruhu. And nevertheless, we only permit him to, to bring up to redeem his fruit, even though he's close to Yerushalayim, because it was an explicit statement. Okay, that was almost a side note. How we know davar shebeminyan tzarich minyan acher latiro. Now let's bring it back to our question. Again, what was our question? Rabbi Yosef is saying, even after the takana of Rabbi Menachem and Zakkai, who said we can accept Eidim all day, and we no longer really have this safek, therefore we no longer have this situation where the Eidim come after Mincha, and we're keeping 2 days of Kodesh, and we're still going to say BEITZA shenolda bazeh asura bazeh. So why is that? So let's go back to our Gemara here. And if you want to tell me, maybe Rabbi Menachem and Zakkai also said, no, from now on, BEITZA shenolda bazeh muteres bazeh. That's not true. Ki imnu ha'edus, BEITZA lo imnu. That when Rabbi Menachem and Zakkai came and said, all he said is that now we can accept edus all day. He never came ahead and said, BEITZA shenolda bazeh muteres bazeh. Meaning, we're assuming that when the initial decree was made, that the Rabbanan came out and said, BEITZA shenolda bazeh, asura bazeh. And therefore, even though the reason no longer applies, because Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai said we can accept Eidim all day, nevertheless, BEITZA shenolda bazeh, asura bazeh, because nobody came out and explicitly said, BEITZA shenolda bazeh, muteres bazeh. So Aryai asks maybe the obvious question, Atu BEITZA b'minyan mi havai? Did the rabbis ever actually come out and make a decree? BEITZA shenolda bazeh, asura bazeh? No. BEITZA be'edus talya milsa. Right? They go hand in hand. All the Rabbanan came along was make decrees, enactments relating to the edus. The halacha with the egg is only a direct consequence of what happens to the edus. So BEITZA be'edus talya milsa. Itzar edus. Itzar BEITZA. When edus is asur. Right, when you can't give Eidus min mincha lamala, and you have a situation of really keeping 2 days kedusha achas, so then BEITZA is also aser. But ishtari Eidus, once you can accept Eidus all day, ishtari BEITZA, then we can say BEITZA shenolda bazeh, muteres bazeh. So we seem to, at least Aryai does not like his reasoning. He doesn't like Rabbi Yosef's reasoning to say BEITZA shenolda bazeh, asura bazeh, even after takana. He says they go hand in hand.
Isn't one an aseh and one like a lo ta'aseh? No.
What do you mean?
I'm saying the accepting edus is more of an aseh. The idea of the BEITZA being usher because we're in Suffolk at this point It's like already, it's like a lota set, right?
And therefore,
you don't have the right to take up the lota set just because you have the says. You know what I'm saying?
But what Aryai is saying is that you're talking about this principle of davar shebeminyan tzarich minyan acher la'atiro, that once a Rabbanan came and make a statement, you can't repeal that until another Beis Din comes. So that never happened with the BEITZA. All the statements were in the realm of edus. Can you accept edus all day or only to mincha? What happens with BEITZA shenolda bazeh muteres or asura bazeh is a direct consequence of that. So the Beis Din never came out and said, you know what, from here on, BEITZA shenolda bazeh, asura bazeh. They never said that. So, once
that direct consequence is a low top set as far as the BEITZA is concerned, that it's also. Right?
But I don't know if that matters. I don't know if Ase and Losas are going to factor into here. One's just going to be direct consequence of the other. If it's Shtei Kedushos, Muteres, Kedusha Achaz, Asura, and that's really it. That's what he's saying. So now we're going to give another reason why even after Takana it's going to be Asur. So back to the Gemara. Rav Adav Rav Shalman Tarvayu mi veiklochis amri afi takanas Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ve'elach BEITZA asura. Why? My timer. Meheira yibana Beis Hamikdash, because hopefully the Beis Hamikdash will be built. V'yomru eshtaked miachlenu BEITZA b'yontav sheni. Last year we ate the egg on the second. The egg was born on the first day. On the second day, hashtanami nechol. So to this year we can do the same. V'lo yadi, and they're not going to realize the eshtaked shtei kedushos hein. Last year was shtei kedushos because again they were accepting edus all day. V'hashta kedusha achasi, but maybe this year is kedusha achas. So the Gemara asks, "Ihachi edus nami lo dekabel." So then say the same thing about edus. We shouldn't allow you to accept edus min mincha lamala. Why? My timer. Meheira yibana Beis Hamikdash v'yomru eshtaked mi lo kibenu edus achodesh kol yom kulo. Well, last year we accepted edus all day on the 30th day. Hashtanami dekabel. So to here, this year also we should accept edus all day. Okay. So we answer, Hachi Hashta, can you actually compare the two cases? No. Hasam Edus Mistura Le Beis Din. Edus is something which is in Beis Din. So we can assume that the Beis Din, the leaders of the generation, are wise enough, smart enough to realize that the circumstances have changed once the Beis Hamikdash was built. But BEITZA L'chol Masura, every one of us can be farmers. We can all have our own chickens. And therefore we can't expect everybody to know the halacha. So therefore we'll be concerned with that, but we won't be concerned with Edus.
What kind of Beis Din are we talking about? Are we talking about the Sanhedrin, what's the authority? I mean, when you have a Beis Din that makes a takana,
yeah.
At what level of Beis Din is it that now? I don't understand the Torah how it works.
Doesn't it have to be the same level?
Well, I'm trying to think when the Sanhedrin Gedalia, you can say, fell apart. I don't know if they were functioning after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and some of these takanas, or davar shebeminyan, were certainly made after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash.
So we're talking about
Rabbi Yochanan said after the
destruction. Yeah.
No longer get to him, so it has to still be going on.
Right. The question is, what was the status of that Beis Din? Was he a Sanhedrin Gedalia of 70 people? What was the actual status? Well, you also have to square. Here we talk about you need a minyan acher, but we also elsewhere we talk about the idea of needing also gadol b'minyan and b'chochma. Not only do you need somebody else to come alongside, you also need like more people, almost like greater people.
Greater in numbers or greater in chachma?
Well, both. Yeah. I mean, greater in number meaning that they're more Talmid Chachamim in the generation, and they also have to be greater in wisdom. So again,
we have the same problem coming up with and for Pesach Gezerus, what level of Beis Din made takanas around kidney and so on.
So that might not be as much of a takana as much of a minhag. And once you accept a minhag upon yourself, you can't just go ahead and throw away the minhag. So I don't think that's not a case of I don't think that's a case of davar shebeminyan. That's more almost they had some sort of psak for the Ashkenazi psak that became the minhag Ashkenaz. Once that becomes the minhag, we can't just go away and ignore the minhag, of our fathers. So the koach of that might be coming from a minhag as opposed to a takana of the Beis Din.
And how does that minhag get its?
So the source might have been because there was a psak of a rabbi, but the fact that I think. Well, it only really matters that they listened to him. If the rabbi said that and maybe they didn't listen to him, that might have not taken hold. Only because we listened to him and because of that minhag, did that really take effect? Okay. Last case we have here. So Rava Amar Afi Takanas Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ve'elach BEITZA asura. Why? This is came back to Mr. what you said initially. So Milo Mode Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, because even Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai admits Sheimbau Eidim min Mincha Lamala. Again, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai allowed Eidim to come all day, but he admits that if the Eidim come min Mincha Lamala, Shenogin also him Kodesh Ulamachar Kodesh. He still thinks you keep 2 days of Yontiv. So look at Rashi Milo Mode. So Afa gav the tikin the kabel edus achodesh kol hayom. So even though Rabbi Menachem ben Zakkai allowed you to accept edus all day, lios moni lemoados min harishon, meaning even if Edim came towards the end of the 30th day of Elul, we would accept them, and we would count that to be the first day of Tishrei. But nevertheless, what did Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai not get rid of? He never got rid of the idea of if the Eidim come in Mincha Lamala to get rid of the second day of Yom Tov. So even though he's going to count the first day of Tishrei as, the day the Eidim come as the first day of Tishrei, he's still going to require you to keep the second day as Yom Tov as well, and that's how we move from 30th of Elul, 1st of Tishrei, to the 1st of Tishrei and the 2nd of Tishrei. Because again, the Eidim, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, are coming min Mincha Lamala. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said we can accept Eidus all day, and therefore that day is the first day of Tishrei. But what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did not get rid of is the fact that if Eidim come min Mincha Lamala, you keep 2 days of Yontiv, right?
So he's redefining that day as the first, not the 30th.
Exactly.
He's saying there were only 29 days in Elul.
And there's first, and then tomorrow's the second day, and we're keeping both of those days as Yontiv. I think that's the source of our minhag nowadays. We keep the first and second day of Tishrei as our 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. And the Gemara just concludes V'amar Rava. We have 3 cases of Shabbos and Yontiv, Shnei Amitam Shagolios, and Rosh Hashanah. So, Hilchse Kavasi de Rav. In all those 3 situations, we paskin like Rav, Bahani Tlas, Bein Lekula, Bein Lechumra. So in this case, again, he says Kedusha Achas. I think Rav says regarding Shnei Amitom Shagalios is Nolda Bazem Muteres Bazeh, and Shabbos and Yontiv he says Asura, and we paskin like Rav in all those 3 situations. Have a good day.